On April 2, 1972, a North Vietnamese armored force was driving south toward Dong Ha. If it crossed the Cua Viet River here, the road into Quang Tri Province would open in front of it. The obstacle was one bridge, and the man sent to destroy it was a Marine captain named John Ripley. He had roughly 500 pounds of explosives. Enemy infantry and tanks were already across the river. The bridge was more than 500 feet long, and the charges had to be placed underneath it, by hand, while the enemy was shooting at the span. The problem was not simply whether the bridge could be destroyed, it was whether Ripley could finish before the tanks reached it. 3 days earlier, North Vietnam had launched what became known as the Easter Offensive. This was not a guerrilla raid. Regular North Vietnamese divisions, supported by artillery and armor, crossed the demilitarized zone and attacked south into Military Region 1. South Vietnamese positions north of Dong Ha began to collapse. That made the town critical. Route 1 ran through Dong Ha and crossed the Cua Viet River on a large American-built highway bridge. Beside it was a railroad bridge. Together, they formed the most direct crossing for forces moving south. On the north bank, North Vietnamese infantry and armor were closing in. On the south bank, South Vietnamese Marines and advisors were trying to keep the crossing out of enemy hands. Captain John Ripley was the senior Marine advisor to the 3rd Vietnamese Marine Infantry Battalion. He knew this ground. He had already fought in northern South Vietnam during an earlier tour. He was also trained in demolitions. But none of that changed the tactical problem. The defenders could not simply trade fire with a mechanized force forever. If enemy tanks crossed the river, Dong Ha could become a gateway instead of a barrier. Then a tank appeared on the bridge. A South Vietnamese Marine fired an anti-tank weapon. The first shot missed. The second struck the vehicle and damaged it. The tank backed away. For a few minutes, the momentum stopped. But everyone at the bridge knew what that meant. The enemy had reached the crossing. Lieutenant Colonel Gerald Turley, the senior American advisor forward with the South Vietnamese 3rd Division, wanted the bridge destroyed. The problem was authority. Vietnamese commanders hesitated. Higher headquarters would not immediately approve the demolition. Turley understood what waiting could cost, so he made the decision himself. He ordered Army Major James Smock and Captain Ripley to blow the bridges. Now the battle changed from holding a crossing to erasing it. Ripley and Smock moved forward with South Vietnamese tanks until they were about 100 meters from the bridge. From there, they crossed open ground under artillery and small arms fire. At the approach, they found South Vietnamese engineers with about 500 pounds of TNT and C4. But there was another problem. The explosives were in the wrong place. If they were detonated where they sat, Ripley believed the bridge might be damaged but remain usable. To bring the span down, the charges had to be distributed beneath the structure along its steel girders. That meant somebody had to go under the bridge. A tall chain-link fence blocked access. Concertina wire ran across the top. Ripley climbed it. His uniform tore on the wire as he forced himself over. Then, carrying explosives and blasting components, he moved out beneath the bridge. There was no walkway. He had to hang from the steel and move hand over hand. Above him was a 2-lane bridge built to carry heavy vehicles. Below him was the river. Across the water were North Vietnamese soldiers and armored vehicles. Ripley later remembered that from underneath, the bridge looked enormous. And he still had his combat gear and rifle on him. The weight became a problem almost immediately. He hung from his hands, tried to swing his legs upward, and fought to hook his heels onto the steel so he could pull himself into the girders. If his grip failed, he fell. If he stopped, the bridge stayed open. If the enemy hit him, the demolition stopped with him. He got himself into position. Then he went back for more explosives. Major Smock stayed near the fence and pushed the boxes toward him. Ripley carried the charges out along the structure and placed them across the girders. Then he did it again and again. The later citation for his action described 5 separate trips under constant enemy fire. This was not a single sprint beneath the bridge. It took hours. While Ripley worked, the tactical picture kept getting worse. North Vietnamese forces were not disappearing. More armor was gathering on the far side of the river. Friendly air support was unreliable in the weather, and the defenders did not know how much time they had before another attempt to cross. Meanwhile, the nearby railroad bridge also had to be demolished. There was no clean moment when the battle stopped, and everyone waited for the engineers. The demolition was happening inside the battle. Finally, the charges were in place, but explosives alone did nothing. Ripley still needed a way to fire them. A battery from a destroyed vehicle was used to complete the circuit. Now came the final decision. Once the bridge was blown, there was no reopening the route for friendly forces. No second attempt. No undo button. At about 4:30 in the afternoon, the charges fired. The bridge twisted, separated from its support, and dropped into the Cua Viet River. The wooden roadway burned. The crossing was gone. For the North Vietnamese armor waiting to move south, the battlefield changed instantly. A straight route became a blocked river. The armored column began shifting west, looking for another crossing toward the Cam Lo area. That movement exposed it to American naval gunfire. Offshore destroyers were already supporting the defense, and later 4 amphibious tanks that moved toward the river were destroyed by naval gunfire near Dong Ha. The bridge had not destroyed the North Vietnamese offensive. It had done something more precise. It had broken its momentum at one critical point. That distinction matters. Ripley did not defeat a division by himself. He did not end the Easter offensive, and Dong Ha itself would not remain secure forever. What he did was remove the piece of terrain the enemy needed at the exact moment they needed it. That forced a mechanized force to stop, reroute, and expose itself. In a battle moving at the speed of tanks, time became a weapon. And the cost of buying that time was carried by one man hanging beneath a bridge with hundreds of pounds of explosives. For decades, John Ripley's action at Dong Ha was recognized with the Navy Cross. More than 50 years later, that changed. On June 18, 2026, the United States awarded Colonel John W. Ripley the Medal of Honor posthumously for what he had done at that bridge. The award citation focuses on the physical courage, the repeated trips, the enemy fire, the explosives, the steel beams. But the tactical lesson is even simpler. The defenders could not stop the enemy everywhere. They only had to stop him at the one place he had to cross. On April 2, 1972, that place was a bridge at Dong Ha. And when the bridge disappeared, so did the enemy's fastest road south.